Everyone, I'm Councillor David Burton, the chairman for tonight's meeting of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee for Maidstone, being held today, Tuesday, the 9th of March 2021. I'd like to welcome you all to this remote meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include the instant messaging. May I ask if anybody else is intending to record? And I'm asking that not to prevent you, just so that others would be aware. Nobody's indicating an intention to record. My role as chairman will continue as usual, but I will be assisted in the management of the meeting by our Democratic Services Officer, Ms. Parfitt. This officer will not steer the debate, but they will assist with implementing the remote meeting protocols. They'll also produce the minutes and provide procedural advice as required. And I would like to remind members that instant messaging will be visible to those viewing, and that it should only be used to indicate when you wish to speak. Let us start with the attendance register. So can I ask Ms. Parfitt to take the attendance register, please, and if members would confirm by saying that they are present.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So, Councillor Burton.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor English.
Present.
Councillor Garton. Councillor Garton. I'll come back. Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
Present.
Councillor Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Mumford.
Present.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
Present.
Councillor Spooner.
Present.
Just going to check one more time for Councillor Garton. No, thank you, Chairman. That concludes the attendance.
Thank you. Ms. Parfitt, could I ask you just to advise us which officers are assisting us this evening and which items they're relating to?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I will just note that I have noticed that Councillor Garton has just arrived at the meeting. Councillor Garton, if you can just confirm.
That's correct. Good evening. Sorry for being late. And I don't know whether a question about lobbying was done already.
No, we're not there yet.
Okay.
Councillor Garton, I'll come to you in due course.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the officers in attendance this evening are the Interim Local Plan Review Director, Philip Coyne, Head of Planning and Development, Rob Jarman, Planning Team Leader from Mid-Kent Legal, Russell Fitzpatrick, Strategic Planning Manager, Mark Edgerton, Senior Planner, Helen Garnett for items 14, 18 and 20, and Principal Planning Officer, Tom Gilbert for items 16 and 17, and myself, Olivia Parfitt, as Clerk.
Thank you. And so to item 1, apologies. We're a full house, so no apologies this evening. And consequently, at item 2, there's no need for substitute members. Item 3, urgent items. You should all be aware that there is an urgent update to item 20, which is an exempt appendix draft statement of common ground, Maidstone Borough and Tunbridge Wells Borough Councils. This was published with the amended agenda because it wasn't available at the original agenda publishing date. I trust you've all received that and had opportunity to review it. And so to item 4, visiting members. I have notification from Councillor Sams and Councillor Mrs. Sams. Are there other visiting
Yes, we are.
members,
Here.
Thank you very much.
Paul Harper attending as a visiting member.
Any items to note?
Obviously the one on the cycle forum, but I'll let you know if anything else comes up during the meeting, David. I think it's unlikely.
Your right is duly reserved. Other visiting members,
Councillor
please.
Young.
All right.
Sorry.
Councillor Mrs. Young.
Councillor Wendy Young is here. Reserve my right possibly
items 16 and 17.
Duly noted.
Councillor Springett here, reserving my rights on all items. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Perry, the same as Councillor Springett. Thank you.
Councillor Nagy, I'd like to speak on any items I indicate on. Thank you.
Your right is reserved.
Councillor Brindle here. The same for me, please.
Thank you.
Wow, it's nearly full council.
Councillor Kimantz, same as Councillor Nagy.
Again, duly noted. Thank you to you all.
Mr. Chairman, we should just be staying put and speaking to our questions. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for advising that. To item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures, please? The silence seems to confirm there are no disclosures for tonight's meeting. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. I myself will note that I've been lobbied on the duty to cooperate protocol and matters of the local plan generally. Are there any other disclosures, please?
Chairman, am I able to go through?
The clerk will go through the list. Sorry, I jumped ahead there.
No problem. So I've noted item 14 and all items relating to the local plan for yourself. Councillor Clark?
All items relating to the local plan only.
Thank you. Councillor English?
I've been lobbied on the item 14 and also on the cycle forum motion.
Thank you. Councillor Garton?
14, 17 and all things local plan in general over a longer period, but particular for this meeting, item 14 and 17.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Grigg?
All items relating to local plan.
Councillor Mackay? Councillor Mackay?
Sorry, 14, 16, 17, 18.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford?
Items relating to the local plan review.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid?
All items relating to the local plan.
Councillor Spooner? Councillor Spooner?
Sorry, I didn't have my, I muted myself. I've been lobbied on items 14 and 17.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the lobbying.
Thank you for your assistance. At item 7, we need to consider if any items need to be taken in private. We have yellow pages for item 20, the exempt appendix 1. At that point, if we wish to consider that paper in any detail, we'll need to move into part 2, but we can make that decision at the time. Is it agreed everything else will be in public, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
And I thank you. Item 8, the minutes of our last meeting held on the 9th of February, circulated with the papers. I trust you've all had a chance to review. I move that it will be agreed as a correct record if I hear no dissent. That is therefore agreed, and I shall sign those at an appropriate time. Item 9, there are no petitions this evening. But item 10, we do have a question from a member of the public. That's Mr. Holmes. Are you with us, Mr. Holmes?
Chairman, Mr. Holmes hasn't actually joined the call this evening. However, I'm happy to read the question out on his behalf if you would like.
Yes, that would be in order. Please do so.
Thank you. So this question is from Mr. Peter Holmes, and the question is, I am deeply concerned about the lack of delivery of vital infrastructure associated with increasing housing numbers. This is particularly the case where I live in the northwest of the borough, but also across the whole borough. Can you tell me how much money has been collected under seal?
So the answer for that question, and I would share the concerns about delivering infrastructure. In fact, I'm sure that all members concern that. Currently, the collected money for SIL in Maidstone is a little under 1.8 million, 1,795,296 if we want to be precise. But of that, only 1.571 million is available for MBC projects, because there is a distribution to parish councils and those with neighbourhood plans. So it sounds like a big sum of money, but when you start looking at the infrastructure delivery plan, it's not a great deal. I may be correct to say, Miss Parfitt, that Mr. Holmes gave advance notice of a supplementary question.
He did, yes. Would you like me to ask that, given that it was pre-submitted? Yes, of course. So the pre-submitted supplementary question was, given the concerns I have expressed, will the SIL rates for Maidstone be reviewed and increased?
Most certainly they will be reviewed, and I think this is an urgent matter for the council. It will require a comprehensive viability assessment, and this needs to be completed, and then a full analysis of SIL rates taking into account land values and development costs. So yes, that is an urgent matter before us to reassess the SIL contributions at an early opportunity. So we're grateful for that question. That is the only question from members of the public this evening. So we can move to item 11, which is questions from members. And I'll call upon Councillor Tom Sams to ask the first question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Regulation 18 consultation responses show 2/3 of residents are not in support of the garden communities. Given this and the number of garden community, garden settlements and garden towns that are falling by the wayside for councils and their local plans up and down the country, are you still confident that the strategy this council is pursuing in relation to Lidsing and Heathlands is a good strategy? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I don't think it's right for me as chairman to individually answer that question, because this is the matter of the ongoing consideration of all members of the SPI committee as we move from the stage we are now, having completed 18B, towards a Regulation 19 consultation document. But I think it is foremost in all members' minds to balance whether the appropriate strategy for Maidstone includes new settlements or was to look at an alternative of a further dispersal. So I'm sure that all members will be giving this due consideration as we move forwards. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. In light of the responses from Medway, which in the report has stated they object to that proposal on transport, environmental and social infrastructure grounds, stating in their response that the site is unsuitable for many reasons, and Highways England comments that the Heathlands new settlement includes text alluding to the possibility for a new junction on the M20, do you think the abbreviated report may be possibly hiding what appears to be, to many, a very troubled and treacherous path ahead?
I don't think there's any way that we can conclude that at this stage. Tonight, as you see on the papers, we are receiving the summary of the consultation responses, and there's much more technical work that needs to be done, which will involve members between now and the Regulation 19 proposals. Thank you for your question. Next, if I could call upon Councillor Mrs. Sams for her question, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The report is for noting this evening, item 17, the Preferred Approaches Public Consultation Regulation 18, and it's very brief. Given the huge number of responses which have just been published and the growing disquiet from residents, do you have any concerns in relation to the garden communities at Lidsing and at Heathlands?
Again, I don't think it's for one individual, me as chairman or otherwise, to comment specifically on that concern. The final decision as to whether it is or to proceed or not will come as we move towards Regulation 19, which ultimately will be endorsed or otherwise by full council. So we've got some way to go yet before we draw conclusions from the analysis of the consultations. Do you have a supplementary question, please?
Yes, I do. But firstly, I'd like to congratulate to all of the many staff who've brought the consultation responses together. I know it's been quite a huge job. But Mr. Chairman, do you think that even at this stage, councillors should be questioning the document and its evidence base, given we now have the responses in full, and that the areas of concern should be open to discussion and to scrutiny? Thank you.
Yeah, I would indeed concur with you. Appreciation to the officers who have put in a tremendous amount of work to get the consultation responses validated, categorised, redacted as appropriate, and published. And that indeed is the main work that has taken place. And we're yet to have the stage of technical evaluation when we'll give further consideration to things. And that will happen between now and Regulation 19. I'm sorry to sound a little bit repetitive, but I'm sure we'll discuss this further when we come to the agenda item. And I thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Item 12, we have the work programme published with the agenda packs. I would just inform you all that the Autumn Neighbourhood Plan, Regulation 17A, will also be with us for our April meeting. But the work programme is just for noting. If there is no dissent, I will assume that this is agreed. And therefore that is duly noted. Item 13, we do not have any reports from outside bodies on this occasion. So we can move to agenda item 14, the practice and procedure protocol in relation to our duty to cooperate. And members will remember that at the last meeting, this was originally noted into the minutes, but we asked for it to be substantiated into a report for us. And that report is going to be introduced to us now by Miss Garnett, if you would be so kind.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report provides an update to the duty to cooperate protocol that was brought before committee on the 12th of January. At that committee, it was resolved that amendments would be made to the protocol as it had then been brought before members. Principally, the changes ratified at that committee centred around, first, it was about giving greater degree of involvement to members in respect to officer level meetings, with these being undertaken in consultation with the chair and vice chair. Second, the precise nature of member involvement at level 3 meetings was clarified. Third, the publication of meeting records on the council's website and the precise nature of that. And fourth, there was clarification on the procedure for dealing with late changes to the statements of common ground. So this report just brings together all of that and sort of sets out the updated duty to cooperate protocol, which sort of takes into account that resolution of the 12th of January. So turning to the report, the protocol for dealing with neighbouring authorities is set out at paragraphs 2.7 and 2.8. Principally, officer to officer level meetings form the first stage, with matters being escalated to senior officers and members as relevant. All officer level discussions will be framed by the emerging statement of common ground and by consultations with chair and vice chair of this committee. Further details regarding the engagement with infrastructure providers is set out at paragraphs 2.9 and 2.10. The approach proposed takes into account the fact that organisational structures and governance arrangements are sort of slightly different for non-governmental bodies. Paragraphs 2.1 and 2.12 set the procedures for recording meetings. That is, they will be recorded in broad outline with details of the topics covered being placed on the council's website. So there will be full minutes, and then on the council's website we will put the details of the meetings in a very outlined, sort of broad outline there. Statements of common ground are the documents that set out what matters have been discussed, how parties have sought to resolve issues, and also the details of matters for which there is agreement and disagreement. Paragraphs 2.13 to 2.15 of this report detail the internal procedures in respect to dealing with these statements. And there's just one additional point that's been raised in addition to the sort of resolution of the meeting of the 12th of January, and that is the report includes how to deal with instances where neighbouring authorities may wish to bring forward a statement of common ground in advance of our own timetable. So we're working to a timetable that aligns with our local plan production or local plan review production. Other authorities are working at different stages, and they may want to bring their statement, the joint statements of common ground forward at a different time. So in these instances, the same procedure would apply as if we'd brought forward the statement of common ground ourselves. So a draft will be brought before committee for agreement. Finally, the report makes the recommendation that members agree the framework as set out and as updated from the 12th of January. Thank you.
Thank you for your introduction. I do have an indication from Councillor Mrs Grigg, but before opening up to members of the committee, can I just check if there are any visiting members wishing to speak? Doesn't sound like there are, so Councillor Mrs Grigg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It's just something that I thought was worth mentioning. As stated, after the statement of common ground has been agreed, any urgent changes are going to be in consultation with the chair and vice chair of this committee. I do think, however, that it's worth just stating that if at any stage either yourself as chair or myself as vice chair are worried about any particular issue, I think that we would definitely call an extraordinary or a special meeting in order to discuss that matter with members.
Absolutely, we would. Haven't got any other indications from members. I welcome the report because actually we've put some more flesh on the bones of the protocol, and I would report back to members, and I'm sure Councillor Mrs Grigg would concur with this, that having already begun to be engaged with officers as instructed by the protocol, the chair and the vice chair, it does become apparent to us that I think Maidstone is ahead of the curve with this, that we've actually got a really good basis for our duty to cooperate responsibilities that perhaps some of our neighbouring authorities haven't quite yet. So, I think we should appreciate our officers for the work they've done and acknowledge the position that we are now in with having a clearly stated way forwards. I'm happy to move as per the papers. Do I have
I'm happy to second. Councillor Grigg will second.
That is seconded. Ms Parfitt, do we need to go through the voting procedure, or can I ask if there's no dissent that is then agreed?
Thank you, Chairman. You can ask that if there's no dissent that be agreed.
Okay. Well, if there is no dissent, and I hear none, that is agreed and concludes that agenda item. Thank you, everyone. So we can now go to item 15. You will recall from our last full council that we had a motion concerning Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum. This was presented by Councillor Harper. It is referred to us. So in a moment, I will ask Councillor Harper to speak to the item. And the options before us this evening are: we can reject the motion, we can accept the motion, we can amend the motion, or we can request further information or a report from officers. Councillor Harper, would you like to speak to us, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short because obviously there was a fairly good discussion of this only last week. I think it was the week before at the council meeting. Clearly, you know, the Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum is potentially a good strategic partner for Maidstone Council in terms of looking at our active travel proposals and the walking and cycling strategy and so on. The relationship has varied at different times, and at times it used to be very good. It sort of has been a bit more well, not quite so good over the last year or two. So really what I'm asking is if the committee would sort of endorse the principles of the motion, and that's really to reboot the relationship, and very much as the chair was saying at the full council meeting, which he's wanting to do. So hopefully you'll endorse that plan of action, and some meetings can be held either this side or just the other side of the local elections. So that's really what I want to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any visiting members that would like to come in on this?
Yes, please.
Councillor Nagy.
Yeah, I said this at the council meeting. As I don't really know what the Cycle Forum do other than their event once a year, as most councillors, and I suggested at that council meeting I'd like to see some sort of report really on what benefit Maidstone Borough Council would get out of it, and vice versa, what would the forum get out of it. I'd just like to have a bit more detail rather than what we had at the last one. Let's get a lot of officers around the table to talk about what really, and I think that's the gist of it for me. What is how professional is the Cycle Forum when it comes to reporting things, and what's their technical background on something like doing cycle lanes and stuff like that? Because obviously that we do need something, because obviously cycle lanes at the moment are a bit of a disaster in Maidstone, and we don't want to see things like that happen again. And the Cycle Forum had nothing to do with that. That was sort of like imposed very quickly for one reason or another. So I think with this we need to set a standard, and if the Cycle Forum is the right partner to go in with, I would go in with them. But I'd just like to see something before that decision's made. And I think this committee would be very wise in just asking for a bit more information, exactly what a partnership means in a bit more detail. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think it should be noted that their role is somewhat enshrined in our integrated transport strategy currently. No other visiting members have indicated, so Councillor English, I believe you wish to speak.
Yes, I realise I should have actually declared an interest, although it's a very marginal one, as I am actually a member of the Cycle Forum, although not a member of the committee. The fact is that in principle, and indeed in the integrated transport strategy, the Borough Council has already, of course, agreed to work together with this organisation along. There is quite, as Councillor Nagy alludes, there is a lot of work to be done on ensuring that maximum value is extracted from working in partnership with the Cycle Forum as with other organisations. I think it's fair to say that some of the perception of a poor relationship is just that, perception, and there is some work to be done, which had already been agreed to be done internally in the planning department on the development control side, to actually ensure that we all are actually doing what we can to maximise input without in any way confusing the relevant roles of particular organisations that are not statutory consultees. That process has already begun, and I think if the committee agree the recommendation this evening, that work can be carried on, and obviously once it's got to a certain point it can be reported and should be reported back to this committee so that everyone is informed in the way that Councillor Nagy would like. On the planning policy side, as chairman of planning, I wouldn't presume to suggest how Councillor Burton and Councillor Grigg and the committee take this forward. But I think that the motion from council does set out a basis on which that can be done. We've got a local plan emerging, integrated transport strategy will need to be updated. And frankly, if you look at the later report on the Nppf, for example, you can see that an input on cycling and pedestrian facilities will be valuable in certain areas. So, but, you know, there's work to be done. What we don't have is a template now. And we shouldn't have, because officers and members need to actually sit down and work out how we get the best value out of this without imposing any significant additional burden on staff.
Thank you, Councillor English. And Councillor Clark, to you.
Yes, I fully endorse the points that Councillor English makes there. I think it's, in terms of moving this forward, it may be a little bit loose at the moment, but we're talking about half-yearly meetings between key officers and the group. We've had a few challenges with the recent cycle lane that happened when it was rushed through. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't do this. I think this is a good starting point. We'll see how it goes, and maybe members, we can all work together to work out what sort of framework. Perhaps even after the first 1 or 2 meetings, we can look to see how effective this is and where we want to go with it.
Okay, I sort of think we might be confusing some issues there, because meetings with the Cycle Forum are ongoing. I think the last one was in fact January. But to address this motion, so from the chair, what I would like to propose is that following the round table conversation with officers, councillors and the Cycle Forum, that a report come back to this committee outlining the suggested working protocols that are to be discussed at that round table, and that we endorse for the time being the continued work with the Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum. And I think I have immediately a seconder from from Councillor English. If there's no one else indicating, Councillor Clark.
I do wonder, as part of that, I fully agree with that. That's a fair way forward. But should we be those protocols? Should we not at least see if there are specific there's specific input that the Cycle Forum wants to put forward as part of that in developing those?
I think that's actually what's suggested in the motion, Councillor Clark, that there be a round table with officers, members and representatives of the Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum to agree those protocols.
Yeah, I'm happy for that to come back.
And then what we're saying is that that would be reported back to us once that's taken place. So if there's no one else indicating, if I hear no dissent, I will consider that to be agreed. And that is therefore agreed. Thank you. To item 16 next. This is consideration of Maidstone Borough Council's response to the government's consultation on draft revisions to the Nppf and a new draft National Model Design Code. Mr. Gilbert, could you lead us into this one, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. On the 8th of February 2021, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government launched a public consultation on draft revisions to the National Planning Policy Framework and a draft National Model Design Code. The consultation closes on the 27th of March 2021. Regarding the National Planning Policy Framework, the changes affect numerous chapters in the document, and these are set out in paragraph 2.3 of the report. The reasons for these changes are reflected in paragraph 2.4 of the report and include responses to other government reviews, clarifications and removal of out-of-date material. A summary of the main changes is outlined in paragraphs 2.6 to 2.23 of the report and affect both the plan making and development management functions of the planning service. Relating to development management, the proposals include a clarification of the requirement that 10% of all major developments involving housing be for affordable home ownership, and this applies to the total number of houses. That tree-lined streets be incorporated into developments, sequential tests for flood risk to include all forms of flood risk. Proposals could be rejected that are not well designed. The scale and extent of development in the setting of national parks and AONB needs to be designed sensitively, and historic statues, plaques and memorials should be protected. The plan making changes are as follows. The development of design codes. Larger scale development should have a 30-year vision. The test of soundness has been expanded to include other statements of national planning policy as well as the Nppf. The restriction of the use of Article 4 directions with a higher test for their use and to be applied to smaller geographical areas. And clarification that neighbourhood plans can allocate large sites as well as small and medium sites and be involved in the development of design policies of the local planning authority. A new piece of national planning policy is also proposed to be introduced, and this is the draft National Model Design Code. The document will support the national government agenda to bring design to the forefront of planning. It sets out a template for how local planning authorities can create their own design codes to manage the design of development in their area. As noted in the report, the consultation closes on the 27th of March 2021. The committee is asked, as per the recommendations, to note the content of the consultation and provide feedback by the 19th of March 2021 on the consultation response as set out in Appendix 1, which will feed into an amended response to be signed off by the Chair and Vice Chair. Thank you for your time, and if members have any queries or comments, myself and the Head of Planning and Development, Rob John, will gladly take them now.
Thank you for your introduction. Before coming to members of the committee, are there any visiting members wishing to address this issue? I see no indication, so over to you, Councillor English.
Well, a couple of comments. I take the point that beautiful, for example, is a subjective term, but there does need to be a definition there. So if it's not a subjective term like beautiful in the consideration of the text for design, what text would perhaps well designed or high quality would be appropriate? Turning to the setting of the AONB. Comments are made in the draft response about not agreeing with that as such because of the sterilisation of land. I have to say, to be honest, I think I would prefer the government's wording on that rather than the response in the report. And finally, the comments are made in relation to cycling and pedestrian policy in the report. Could you clarify your comments there in terms of not actually saying attractive? Because really you're objecting to the use of that term. Any particular reason?
Officers, would anybody care to come back on Councillor English's points?
Yeah, I can come back on that. Councillor English, can I just clarify which point in the response about cycling you're referring to, just so I'm on the exact...
Yes, oh, well, trouble is I haven't got the screen up. I have kept carrying to switch. In terms of these wording on the Nppf, it actually says that you don't... The government's paper is about attractive cycling and pedestrian routes, and the officer response is to delete the term attractive because it's subjective.
Oh yes, yep, I'm with you now. Yep. Yes, I think there was it was just trying to get further clarification on what that meant. I mean, if we can put in our response a response to ask for a further definition and further clarity rather than deletion, if you prefer.
Yeah, I think the clarity would be, in that sense, would be attractive for potential users. That's how I would see it, and perhaps we could clarify that if that's what they mean by attractive, we support it.
Yep, that's fine. I'll note that down, Councillor English.
And on the point on the setting of the AONB.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor English, to interject. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't think that was the intention. Obviously, it'd be far too binary just to protect the land within the AONB. It has to be the setting as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think I prefer the original government wording to our response. Well, in general, I would say that I do think this is a very well written officer response, and the fact that I'm picking up on nitpicking points like this actually indicates how good it is.
Thank you, Councillor English. No other indications at this time. On this issue, Councillor Clark, you want to come in?
It was proposed changes to Chapter 4 on page 31. I do agree with the response, and I also feel that this was a very well written paper in terms of response overall. But with this one, I think it would be worth mentioning the risk of us losing our sort of best office space. It's something we've worked on over the last couple of years in strategic planning. We're talking about the government's trying to reduce it down to the minimum, the smallest geographical area possible. Well, obviously, if you're sort of looking at a town centre, that makes it very, very convenient in terms of doing office conversions. I just wonder whether we might say that we've taken steps to protect our best office space, and we would wish to continue to do so.
Yes, sorry. Personally, I think we have followed government advice, as you alluded to, Councillor Clark, with the fairly recent office to Resi Article 4s. There were 14 sites, individual sites, so we have followed that advice.
Thank you.
I completely agree. And that was what I was alluding to. And obviously, in this response, I think that my feeling is that we should refer to that. I think it's to our, we should be praised for the fact that we've actually followed that, and we've put in place measures to protect commercial space that could jeopardise the local plan if we lose it.
Okay. Yes, we can make explicit reference to that, Councillor Clark, in our response.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to just pick up again on the issue of the setting of the AONB. What just makes me slightly nervous on this point is we do need to have the latitude to accept that the setting of the AONB is a different thing to protecting the AONB. And I sometimes wonder that when we discuss this matter, that we're almost wanting to put the same level of protection to the setting as the AONB itself. And I think there needs to be acknowledgement that there's a scale of protection of the setting compared to the AONB itself. I don't know whether anybody else thinks that.
I have to say, Councillor Burton, I'm not on the same wavelength with you on that one. To be honest, I think you can't. Part of protecting the AONB is protecting the setting of the AONB, although you might want to put it in the policy in slightly different terms, because the view to and from the AONB is an integral part of the AONB's character.
But the danger is that you then need to protect the setting of the setting.
No, I understand
There
that.
has to be a scale that applies.
Yeah, I think there is sufficient case law, I think, to actually say roughly what a setting is. But that which is why I think the government have deliberately not gone into great detail here, because if they went into great detail, you would be at danger of leaving out half the issues you need to consider because you didn't put them in, and the assumption would be because it's not there, it's okay. And so I think it's better to not be too prescriptive in that sense.
Yeah, I think then perhaps we are on the same page by not being.
Perhaps we put it slightly differently then.
So long as we accept that they are different things, the AONB and the setting of the AONB. Mr. Jarman, did you want to help us with that?
Yes, I was going to agree with both of you. I would say my reading of the Nppf is that within the AONB, the status is higher than the setting. But I do remember the days before the Nppf referred to the setting, one would get into arguments with developers because the AONB boundary is a bit random in places. And I remember a site which was outside the AONB in Harrietsham, but I was just arguing, as Councillor English is alluding to, that it's still on the scarp slope of the North Downs. So it's still the same topographical feature. So I think they've both got high status, but within the AONB is slightly higher than the setting.
And some parts of the setting, is what you're saying, may have more significance than others.
Yes, I think for obvious reasons, tall buildings, for instance, right, and has been proven at public inquiry not that long ago, something of scale in front of the scarp slope of the North Downs is obviously going to affect its setting.
Okay. Without any other indications, I think we're moving to conclusion.
Mr. Chairman, I indicated.
Oh, right. Sorry, I misinterpreted your comment when it said me. I thought it was in response to something I said. So, yeah, Councillor Garton.
No, I don't have that telephone symbol on my keyboard, unfortunately, Mr. Chairman. I'm sort of with Councillor English on it, that I have great respect for Mr. Glover and his team. And if the government and the briny people in Westminster put their hat on and were thinking of how can we interpret Mr. Glover's review outcomes best in reformulating a new sentence, I think we would be very prudent to take their interpretation rather than trying to reinvent the wheel here on tweaking it by little word games. So I would be more than happy to support Councillor English in simply reverting back to the government's description of it. I think we are all basically singing from the same hymn sheet, and that's why I think we should go with what has been thought up by wiser people than us.
Okay, so in summary, I'm sensing that we have support as per the papers, with a note to seek some definition on what is meant by attractive with regard to cycle routes, I think it was, with a comment on the setting of the AONB, and perhaps a note to the effect of how we have protected office accommodation of value. So with those three pointers to amendment of the draft as presented, can I ask, is there a seconder to agree that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will.
Councillor English, you were there. So once again, I shall say if there is no dissent, we shall consider it to be agreed. I hear no dissent, therefore that is agreed and concludes that item. Thank you, everybody. And so to item 17, this is reporting to us the Regulation 18B consultation responses. And prior to the report's introduction, Mr. Healy would like to address us on behalf of Save Our Heathlands Action Group. Mr. Healy.
Thank you, Chairman. And
you have up to 3 minutes to do so.
Okay, thank you, and good evening, members. Tonight's report on the consultation results can be described as, well, quite underwhelming, to be honest. Thousands of residents spent many thousands of hours taking the time to respond to this consultation in what was originally a very short time window to participate. The huge strength of feeling was demonstrated by such a large response. We believe this to be the highest response to any NBC consultation. We are therefore very disappointed that this report to you tonight overlooks the very many issues that have been raised by residents and consultees. We've been told for 2 months now that officers have been analysing the responses and this analysis would be presented to this committee. This report is not analysis. This report is a cursory summary of key themes, principally of the statutory consultees, that would have taken no more than a few hours to draft. Where is the analysis? We have been told time and again by this committee that full public scrutiny and debate of this local plan review will be had. This debate is now long overdue and we want to see it played out without further delay. We cannot continue with members just sitting silently by. In October 2017, following the tumultuous former local plan process, residents were assured that lessons would be learned and the plan making process would be improved. The chairman of the then Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee and the chairman of this committee, Councillor Burton, said in response to a public question at the time, if there is a lesson that I would like to take forward into the future, it is that we take a very calm approach to the evidence at the beginning. I'm sure that we will not like matters in front of us, but let's go on with positive, productive, constructive planning from day one. We are still waiting for this positive, productive and constructive planning approach. And turning specifically to the Heathlands proposition itself, the response to the 18B consultation has been unanimous. This is not the right solution. Over 500 residents from Lenham and surrounding villages have presented compelling cases as to why this is the wrong development in the wrong location. The new railway station that the promoter is desperately relying upon to support the development and its desperate sustainable transport strategy is not supported by Network Rail. Highways England confirmed that there will be no new motorway junction at Lenham Heath. Natural England and the Kent AONB unit have very strong concerns with the proposal. Neighbouring authority Ashford's entire response to the consultation is all about significant concerns with Heathlands. KCC, CPRE, Southern Water all have concerns, along with Lenham, Charing, Harwich, Egerton parish councils. Even housing developers oppose this development. The list just goes on and on. Heathlands currently has no landowners signed up, it has no infrastructure providers signed up, and most importantly, it has no one of the local community signed up to it. This is more than just NIMBYism, this is whole.
Have we lost Mr. Healy?
Chairman, Mr. Healy is showing us still in the call, but he is, let me see, he has just rejoined.
Mr. Healy, are you back with us?
I'm back. Presume that wasn't intentional.
Further sort of 15-20 seconds if you want to continue.
Okay. Save Our Heathlands has spent the last 18 months making the case that Heathlands is unsustainable, undeliverable and unviable. It is high time for this committee to put Heathlands out of its misery and go back to the drawing board and come up with another approach on how the housing need is going to be met. It will demonstrate that you have listened to the groundswell of public opinion and have acted upon it. This is the real purpose of effective consultation, rather than just simple box ticking. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Healy. And next I will invite Mr. Hawkins on behalf of DHA Planning, who's also asked to address us on this matter. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. As you know, members agreed to progress the Regulation 18B consultation on the basis that they would review and debate the proposed strategy once you had received and assessed all consultation responses. The report before members this evening provides a superficial summary of the consultation responses and is for noting only and contains no analysis of the representations or how these should continue to shape the local plan. It does not invite or seek members' views on key issues. In summary, the report before you tonight highlights a number of important issues, and these include Maystone's ability to fulfil their duty to cooperate, and both Ashford Borough Council and Medway object to the two largest allocations in the plan. The significant harm caused the AONB, particularly from the Heathlands proposal, and it's important to note the AONB unit's response is omitted from this report. Highways England will not support a new motorway junction for Heathlands and raise concerns about the lack of proper assessment on the existing network. Network Rail are not supportive of the provision of a railway station at Heathlands, despite your own evidence saying it is necessary to make this site acceptable. And of course, the weight of public opposition to Lidsing and to Heathlands. I would therefore ask members to consider whether they are happy to simply note this high-level summary with no scrutiny of these crucial issues before officers present you at Regulation 19 stage in 3 months' time. To my mind, without questioning or scrutinising the consultation responses tonight, there's a risk of perpetuating the perception that the plan is a done deal and that comments made will not be properly considered. As you all know, transparency and clarity in your decisions is crucial, not just to public opinion, but also to the soundness of plan making. There is an opportunity tonight to consider and debate whether you are happy to proceed with a strategy that has been identified as harmful to the AONB. Furthermore, tonight provides an opportunity to seek more assurances that a station at Heathlands is deliverable and consider whether the lack of a motorway junction is acceptable without any modelling to justify its impact. It's no coincidence that many of the consultation responses reflect the concerns set out within your own sustainability appraisal. Given there are only now 3 months until the Regulation 19 local plan is to be produced, I would therefore contend that this is the time to fully scrutinise the consultation responses because there will be little time before June. The spectre of increasing housing numbers has subsided. There is no need to rush through a local plan and in do so risk it failing. I would contend that this is the time to pause and to fully analyse, reflect and consider the consultation responses which do not support your current spatial strategy. I would therefore respectfully ask that you consider whether simply noting this report is in the best interests of the borough or whether this should be the starting point for a thorough analysis of the draft plan. Now you are armed with the considered and detailed consultation responses. Consideration of these matters now won't make the plan worse, but it could certainly make it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Are there any visiting members that would like to? Well, no, actually, what we'll do next is we'll go to have the report introduced by Mr. Gilbert, please.
Thank you, Chair. The report presented is a local plan review update as requested by this committee. Specifically, it references the recent Regulation 18B preferred approaches consultation that was undertaken between the 1st of December 2020 and the 8th of January 2021. The report sets out the following: the number of responses, a summary of responses relating to garden community proposals at Heathlands and Lidsing, a summary of responses from a selection of statutory consultees and infrastructure providers, and a summary of responses from neighbouring local planning authorities. It is noted that the report is only a summary and the full responses can be found on the Council's website for review. In total, a high level of response to the preferred approaches consultation was received, approximately 3,200 representations. These included representations from members of the public, businesses, developers, parish councils, elected officials including borough and county councillors and MPs, pressure groups and technical bodies. The majority received were from members of the public, residents of the borough and those adjacent authorities. As highlighted in the report, the highest level of response was received regarding the garden community proposals for Lidsing and Heathlands, approximately 2,300. Many of these were in respect of Lidsing, with approximately 1,700 responses, and Heathlands receiving approximately 500 responses. The main issues raised for both are laid out in the report, paragraphs 2.8 to 2.11. There was a good level of response from infrastructure providers and statutory consultees, as stated in the report, paragraphs 2.12 and 2.50. Overall, the main concerns raised related to highway network capacity, especially in South East Maidstone, the knock-on impact of proposed growth on the strategic road network, referring to M20 and M2, wastewater network capacity and the need for upgrades, gas network capacity for sites in the vicinity of Marden, level crossing safety caused by increased usage because of new development, the need for new GP surgery healthcare provision, the impact on the Kent Downs AONB and protected habitats, and the heritage impact of proposals. Discussions with these bodies are ongoing. The Council is working to resolve these concerns raised through these discussions and further evidence-based work between now and the Regulation 19 consultation. Responses from most neighbouring authorities received, and these are set out in paragraphs 2.51 and 2.61 of the report. In summary, the main concerns included impact on infrastructure, impact on landscape and protected habitats, housing supply, and the cross-boundary impacts of growth. Similarly to the infrastructure providers and other statutory consultees, the Council is engaged in further duty to cooperate discussions with its neighbouring authorities to try and resolve these issues. It is also presently drafting statements of common ground to this effect. Next steps. Clearly, the responses received to the consultation are not standalone items. The responses will be considered alongside the evidence base, that current and emerging, and the way site promoters are responding to issues raised in the consultation. All of this will then form the basis of further work with elected members in establishing the spatial strategy to be promoted at Regulation 19. This report is for noting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to visiting members next. Currently, I'm only seeing one indication, which is Councillor Mrs. Brindle. I did lose connection for a few moments, so can I ask any other visiting members to indicate in the IM? Councillor Mrs. Brindle.
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst I agree with the majority of the comments made by Messrs Hawkins and Healy, the majority of which can also refer to Lidsing, where it was noted that approximately 1,700 responses were made. I agree that the responses can be seen on the Council's website, but I would welcome confirmation that there will be a more detailed analysis made that will make easier reading for those members of the public specifically who have spent many hours producing their responses to this consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other visiting members, please? So I now open this up to members of the committee. Councillor Garton.
Mr. Chairman, I've always voted against Consultation 18B simply because of the time restraints we're seeing here. We're between a rock and a hard place, but we've had a lot of public speakers tonight who want us to have an in-depth look into the responses and take heed on the responses and the work which actually went into the responses. I mean, as Councillor Brindle quite clearly said, there's a lot of work went into it by the public in responding. However, we're also pushed for timelines, plus we've got elections ahead. Could an officer, I'm not sure which officer would be the most appropriate one here, but could an officer explain to us the timeline and what we as committee members and as council members have to do with this Section 18B response between now and Regulation 19 consultation, which I presume is just after the election. So I just want to have an explanation to give the public some confidence in our timetable.
I'm wondering which officer might be best to respond, Mr. Edgerton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so first of all, I'd like to point out that we held successful engagement with members in the lead into Regulation 18 Preferred Approaches consultation. Members will probably recall that quite vividly. We discussed some pretty important issues in that regard, and it resulted in a higher quality document. It is officers' intention to undertake engagement with members in the lead into the Regulation 19, and as we've stated in the report, quote 5.1, paragraph 5.1, for example, of this report, we are intending to report the main analysis from the preferred approaches consultation as we move towards the Regulation 19 and as part of the Regulation 19 proposals. So I think I can reassure members that it is the intention to undertake engagement as we lead into Regulation 19, so that they have every opportunity to consider the latest evidence, the latest information, and what our detailed assessments are stating, so that any alterations to the documents as we move to Regulation 19 can be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. So it would seem to me that to continue our calm approach is indeed a matter of over the next few months receiving that opportunity to look at this in more detail as we shape up towards Regulation 19. So I think it is appropriate that we note the report this evening, which summarises the consultation responses, and we look forward to the further member engagement that is necessary between now and when we start to conclude a Reg 19. Councillor Mumford.
Yeah, it's just a concern that I've got. The engagement for the consultation Regulation 18B was very local, where members spoke about their local area. I maybe I missed some of it, but more on a strategic level where we look at the overall plan. That's where I think the public want the engagement. And if I can have that assurance from officers, I'm quite happy to continue along the path we're going. But my recollection of 18B, the engagement was very much speaking to members about the sites within their patch, as opposed to the overall strategy of what we were doing.
A direct response for Councillor Mumford, please. Perhaps you again, Mr. Edgerton.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Mumford. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that, you know, it was important that we were, as part of our preferred approaches, coming to grips with individual sites, the role they could play, the principles, the emerging spatial strategy, both the top-down and the bottom-up approach in that regard. We've been able to produce quite a detailed document for Regulation 18 preferred approaches, which, as I say, is partly due to the engagement that took place with members in the run-up to the public consultation. But I'm quite happy for now that we've got to this stage that whereas we will still need to discuss sites individually and give attention to detail, we can also deal with that slightly larger picture now. The overall scope and spatial strategy once again can take prominence, and we can move forward on that basis. So I'm happy to agree with Councillor Mumford and to work with members to ensure that we can look at this in the round and deal with things on a more strategic level as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I think this committee is set up for, is the strategy, the overall strategy. I did welcome, and I thought this time round, the engagement on local sites with the local ward members was excellent. But this committee should be looking at the overall strategy as opposed to individual sites.
I absolutely agree with you, Councillor Mumford. I think the work that was done was what allowed to bring consensus on the preferred approach that we've just consulted on, and I think we will be, building that way of working towards Regulation 19, which of course is a far more technical consultation document, when we will be most mindful about soundness as we move forwards. If there are no other speakers, we're invited to note the report this evening, and if there is no dissent, it shall be so noted. Then that's noted. Thank you. Concludes that item for this evening. And we are at item 18. This is the draft statement of common ground between Maidstone Borough Council and Tunbridge Wells Borough Council. We're going to ask Ms Garnett to introduce this to us as a matter of public forum, and then if members are minded to delve into the yellow pages, we would need to go into part 2. But if we could start with an open introduction, is that possible, Ms Garnett?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. So this report brings before members a statement of common ground that has been jointly prepared by Maidstone Borough Council and Tunbridge Wells Borough Council. Both authorities have worked closely on their duty to cooperate over a number of years, and this statement of ground is a sort of culmination of those discussions, bringing together the key strategic cross-boundary matters that have been considered as part of those discussions. The document, as appended to the report, thematically details the nature of discussions to date. Broadly, both authorities are expecting to meet their housing and employment land need, and that further discussions will continue in all matters as their local plans have progressed. There's a key point here in terms of timing. So this statement of common ground has been brought forward in advance of the sort of main tranche of statements of common ground, and that's because Tunbridge Wells are about to go out to consultation on their Regulation 19 plan, and for this they will need the signed statement of common ground in place for that. Members should note that a statement of common ground is not a document that is developed unilaterally. So, it's a collaborative process. It's co-production, and therefore members should be aware that any further changes that might be made will need to be agreed with Tunbridge Wells Borough Council before it can be signed. It's also important to note that the statement of common ground is an iterative document. It can be updated and re-signed as appropriate, and therefore signing this document at this time does not preclude further updates and additions. Maidstone Borough Council and Tunbridge Wells Borough Council will, of course, sign the statement of common ground and again in advance of Maidstone Borough Council's Regulation 19 consultation. And the recommendation of the report is that members agree to the draft statement of common ground as appended. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any visiting members that would like to say anything at this stage? No indications. So I think we have an option here. If you would like to give some more detailed questions on the yellow pages, we need to go into part 2. If members are content with the content of the yellow pages, because the decision is actually published, or the recommendation is published in the white pages, that the decision to support or otherwise would need us to come back to open session. I'm seeing one nod that members are content and have digested the yellow pages and don't require any detail. So I'm going to check with our officer. We're not obliged to go into a part 2 session if everybody is content with their reading. Is that correct, Ms. Parfitt?
That is correct, Chairman.
Thank you. Another indication of content. So I'll ask one last time. Anybody wanting any detail in the yellow pages for discussion? That does not appear to be the case. So the recommendation that we actually have is on page 53, and that's that we agree the statement of common ground. I will move that from the chair, and that's seconded by Councillor Mrs. Grigg. And of course, it has been stated this is an iterative process. This is the position as of here today. And there will, of course, be further meetings and the duty to cooperate. And I think we can all fully expect it to evolve further. So moved and seconded as per the papers. And let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. And if I hear no dissent, that will be agreed. No dissent, and therefore it is agreed. That concludes that agenda item. I think there's one further matter in front of me, which is to confirm that our adjourned date, our reserve date, which was the day after tomorrow, will now be released because we are completed of this agenda. And I'd just like to thank everybody for their attention and considerations this evening and their contributions. And there is a message about to pop up in the IM, I think. Or have you just got... Yeah. So preempting what I'm about to say, I'm pleased to close the meeting and thank you once again to everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.